Well. 3 holes in the ground, as my mum used to say. Well. 3 holes in the ground. It is evening, and we are here doing Big Hairy News. Good evening to you, Ms. Do you go by Ms. Ashton? What do you do
Fuck
for
yeah.
your
Yeah.
Ms.?
Oh, yeah. I will not be defined by marital status, and fuck you. That's how I decided on that one.
Ms. Isn't it funny? I guess there are various usage of verbiages for males, because you can be master as a boy and then Mr.
Yeah, but only as a boy, you know?
Yeah, but there's not that kind of miss as an adult, or the male version of it, is there?
No,
Like,
there
you
is
can
nothing.
get to 30, but you can't. There's only Mr. once you're kind of above
Yeah.
17 or 18.
Because they don't like to define you by your marital status and availability and chattel's worthiness, as they have done for women over the centuries.
I feel a bit of Jane Austen coming out in you already, mate.
Totally, man. I mean, like, it's like when you look back, just the history of that word is so loaded. Language is so sexist. Think of all the words you know for slut, but there aren't any that are specifically for a man.
I can't think of any.
Yeah,
I'm too nice.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all.
Hey, well, if you've never seen what we do before, because we're doing this at a very different time, this is called BHN, or Big Hairy News. Now, just before people say, well, look at the beard and blokey, and it's like, no, it's about the big hairy news story of the day. It's like we have big, hairy, audacious goals. These are big, hairy news stories. And it's more a news conversation than it is anything else. And we have been running this for about 2 months. We've been doing this 5 days a week, sans public holidays, for a couple of months. And we did them at 11 a.m. for most of the time. Last week, we did them at midday. And we're just kind of feeling out what it's like to do them at different times during the day. So now we're doing them at 10 p.m. for this week. Now, you can join in at any stage. We are able to receive your chats that are being sent in on YouTube, or I think we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitch, we're on, I don't know. We're not on Rumble yet because we're not quite right-wing enough, but maybe one day we'll see what happens.
Right, okay.
But all those other places we are on. And so we just kind of get some news stories of the day, and we have a look what's going on, and we have a bit of a chat, and we get your input, and we have often we have experts and sort of academics on, and Stephen Hoadley's already said to us this week he'll come in and talk about Ukraine. When I say come in, he'll probably be like us in his pajamas in his house somewhere, talking about Ukraine. And tomorrow night, Radar's with us. Wednesday night, we've got a local Dunedin comedian, Chewy, with us. Jeremy Elwood's coming in during the week, and we just get together and have a bit of a chat, hang out with you at the same time. You've done this a few times now, Penny. Is that a pretty fair sort of synopsis?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I've got hairy legs in your honor. I decided not to shave them this year. I was like, fuck it, I don't want to, so I'm not going to. So there you go. And I've just been on the panel. Hey?
I'm not going to shave them all year. Is that the plan?
I haven't until the summer season. For the summer season, I was like, nah, because I didn't really go out very much either, right? Because I've been hibernating from COVID shit. And so, I was like, nah, I just don't think I will.
Yeah, fair enough. Does it, when you're performing on stage, is there anything that requires it? I guess in Jane Austen's time, they didn't anyway, did they? So like a hair, or Dickens's time?
I have stockings. I have stripy red stockings for Dickens and pink stockings for Austen. So it's all neatly hidden away.
No. Cool, man. So let's have a chat about stuff. There's quite a bit going on at the moment. Actually, tonight's a pretty heavy sort of, well, it could be seen as a pretty, I don't mean heavy as in heavy, like Neil from the Young Ones, heavy, man. I mean heavy like, and there's quite a bit of information kind of around the climate change issue, although not all of the things are about climate change per se. But like, we're going to talk about EVs. We're going to talk about flooding in Bulla. We're going to talk about Kerry Woodham apparently not being able to read. We're going to talk about some other bits and pieces like that to do with climate change, and some other bits and bobs as we go through the night as well. Now, it's just me and Penny tonight. So if you want to jump in and get involved, make sure you message us on whatever platform you're watching us on, and we happily can include your comments along the way as we're talking about it. So I thought this was quite a good one for us to talk about tonight, Penny, because you and I have sort of, I was going to say sparred. It's the wrong word. We've talked about this before, coming from maybe 5% differentials in our perspective to what to do about climate change when we go to EVs and public transport and that kind of stuff. And I'm probably more in the, not that I'm anti-public transport, but I'm probably more in the camp of, let's figure out how to get EVs. And not to paraphrase what you said, but you're more in the camp of let's sort the fucking public transport out. And I think together we kind of cover everything. But a massive announcement made today by the government. 569 million to get Kiwis into EVs. Gas guzzlers face a ban. Criticism over AG omission, agriculture emission. Over a third of cars on the road will be electric or hybrid, and high-emitting vehicles will be banned under a significant plan unveiled by the government. The $4.5 million funding announced today will help reduce global warming and avoid the catastrophic impacts of climate change. It's interesting that it says will avoid. I think probably what's fair is might contribute to helping. Avoid implies it's going to let's sort all the shit out, and then we'll be fine after that. It also includes $500 million to help low-income families shift to electric and hybrid vehicles, part of the government's commitment to ensuring climate action does not further entrench inequality, which I think is good, because I know you and I have talked about this, and I did it again today out of interest, started to have a look around what EVs were going to cost. Like when I'm ready to upgrade meaning new car, if I go to an EV, what is out there? And really, the most entry level EV you'll get is 40 grand, but most of them are kind of 70 grand and up. So what that would mean is the wealthy or even the above average would be able to do this sort of thing, and then as always those down the bottom would be left paying massive amounts for their fuel because they can't afford to get into EVs.
I am so much more about the public transport side of things. The most I've ever spent on a car is $7,000 ever. And I have and also I tour a lot, right? So an EV for me is actually no good, because I was talking on the Radio New Zealand about this today, and the other guy that was on with me, I can't remember his name, Raj, he said that he takes 4 hours to charge his car with a really fast charge. And if I'm driving to Wellington to do my show in Wellington, I just can't justify the expense. I haven't had a show for 11 months, to suddenly turn around and splash that sort of cash on a car. It's just unfeasible. And obviously I'm not going to take public transport to Wellington either, with all my set and stuff. But for me, the stuff that would make a tangible difference in my life would be the improvement of the public transport network and the cycling, for example, because my husband cycles 60 Ks a day. So that's the sort of stuff that I was wanting to get a little more of, maybe a little more stuff around e-bikes. And the thing is too, you don't want to be, everybody's going to complain. And that it's so hard to put these things out because someone's always bitching and moaning. So I just want to acknowledge that it's something, at least they're doing something. There's some really big steps. There's some tangible things towards things. But for me, an EV is just completely out of the question right now. So then I was like, so what is there so much to encourage me to get out of my car? Because I've used public transport to get into town before, and I fell asleep on the train once. I was going out for the night. I was all excited, and then I fell asleep before I got into town. It's because I'm an old lady. Because it took an hour. It just took such a long time to get there. So we just want quicker public transport, more often public transport, better routes for public transport, etc. would make such a huge difference in the bigger cities.
I was thinking about it today, and I actually spoke to a couple of local dealers. I had the funniest experience today. This might not light your boat at all, Penny, but for those who are like keen on cars and stuff, I phoned up Ford today because the Ford does an F-150 truck, which they sell one every 3 minutes in the US. It's the biggest selling truck in the world. They brought out one called the Lightning, and it's all EV. And I'm just like, that's my dream car. And because I was I wasn't really thinking I'm going to be able to get one, but I thought I'd do some investigating. I phoned up the Ford phone number. Took me to Australia. I spoke to the person and asked about the Ford F-150 Lightning, and he went, never heard of that. What's that? And I went, it's like the biggest truck in the world at the moment. It's manufactured by your company. I don't know what you're talking about. And the guy at Ford didn't know what I was talking about. So I then went to a local Dunedin dealer and just phoned them and had a chat. And then from there I went to another one about another one. And the thing I said to them for me and EVs is I live in Dunedin. So I think Queenstown and I think Christchurch. That's my range. That's what I want to be able to drive before I have to charge. And I think we're sort of there now. And I'm interested to say you drive to Wellington. Is that just a choice thing? Because I would think flying obviously is quicker, but would probably cost a lot less, especially with fuel and stuff at the moment.
Not when I've got a whole set and costumes.
Right, of course. So you're basically touring with a massive thing. Gotcha.
Yeah, I have a Nissan Note. It's not massive. And that's the other thing. I was interested. The MTA was talking about the fact that we maybe need a transition period, not just straight to EVs, but to lower emitting, like, because my car is very low emissions. Like a Nissan Note of the types of cars is fuck all, you know. And I was looking at the cars that emit the most is the Rolls Royce. So don't buy one of those.
Okay, I was going to pick one of those up next week, Penny, but I won't now.
Exactly, but it's like the Ferraris and the Rolls Royces, and then the big things like they're the ones who actually emit the most. And then there's things like tiny little hatchbacks like mine. So it feels like it needs to be a bit of a continuum. You know what I mean? Like,
I think the government's doing that right now because they've got the tax that they're putting on utes and those large emissions, and I'm pretty sure things like the Suzuki Swift still gets a rebate, even though it's not an electric, because it's a low emitting car. So I kind of think I feel like, I could be wrong. If you're watching right now, please correct me in the chat, but I feel like we have that going on right now. A little bit.
Yeah, because there's no other. I was going to put my hair up because I'm a bit warm. There's just no option for me, you know, otherwise. Because, and I tour around the country all the time. Like I'm going to New Plymouth. This is the thing, actually, like to reconcile the life of a touring performer with climate change is difficult. Like, you know, I go to Canada. I used to go to Canada a lot. Obviously, my emissions have been very low in these last couple of years, but it's hard to reconcile all of that. And I would like to be able to, you know, do that better, but then 40 grand, it's like, oh my God, there's just no way I could do 40.
And that's it. And that's if you're lucky. Like I've got a mate who's just ordered an EV and he got one for about 45 and he said they're all sold out. Now, if he actually took that, put it straight on the market, he'd probably sell it for 60. So even though you say 40, unless you're buying secondhand, and I think secondhand EVs at the moment are the batteries in the new ones coming out now, they sort of have an 80% rating for the next 20 years, whereas the batteries in the ones from 5 or 10 years ago, if you have to replace them, it's almost the cost of a car sort of thing. So I don't think secondhand EVs are the way to go quite yet. In about 10 years' time, they probably will be.
Yeah, right. And because that's the other thing is about the minerals in the batteries and mining the batteries and where are they mined, and is it in a country that uses coal-fired electricity to fire that? You know what I mean? Like it's not so cut and dry that way and stuff as well. And I'm not against it, but I'm just saying it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And
the other thing they'll have to do, and you've used a good example of it, and probably I am as well if I was going to Christchurch or if I was going further north, is that they'll have to, if they're going to bring this in, like the UK recently announced that there will be no petrol cars sold in the UK post 2030. That means new vehicles, obviously. Secondhand cars will still be able to be sold. But what the UK now has, and obviously America has it now with Tesla and stuff, is a very good bank of rapid charges up and down their motorways.
Yeah.
So New Zealand doesn't have that quite yet. They've got 50 kilowatt charges, but you know, some cars can take up to 200 kilowatts. The government will also need to put in infrastructure where you can pull into one of those, sit there for 10, 15 minutes and get an 80% charge and keep going. Then it's not such a big deal because it's like stopping for petrol, going to the toilet, getting a pie. You know what I mean? It's not quite
like half an hour I could deal with, right? But, 4 hours. I was like, what? I asked that guy today, Faraj, and he said 4 hours. So,
I'm surprised that to the fast charge. I mean, that might be overnight. I mean, most cars will charge from your wall socket in about 8. So him saying 4 hours for a fast charger doesn't make sense to me, but I don't have a car.
It's a home fast charger. So maybe that's
okay.
Yeah.
Let's just finish this story as well. That was not really finishing. We just finished the part I was going to do. So we talked about what the government's doing, ensuring climate action does not go further. It's been met with a mixed responses amongst climate experts and commentators, many of whom don't see it going far enough, particularly with little said about the responsibility of agriculture, which makes up about half the emissions. The government's emissions reduction plan unveiled today represents one of the most important and ambitious steps Aotearoa has made to do its bit towards tackling a climate crisis fast approaching the symbolic 1.5 degrees centigrade threshold and reaching the target net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We talked about, I don't know this exactly the other week, but we've also obviously just had that group coming out, I think from Victoria University, who have done the map showing not only is the sea levels rising and the world's getting warmer, but because we live in the shaky isles on 2 tectonic plates, a lot of our coastlines are actually sinking as well. So the government needs to get onto it. But I want to say one thing, and I think I've said this to you before, Penny, and I actually found it. A blog that I wrote. I don't use this blog anymore. I wouldn't even know how to get into it. It's just sitting there. But this was written, now the writing's pretty poor, but it was written in 2008. So that was 14 years ago. This was the hypocrisy of both. This was what I was writing. I was still figuring it all out for myself, so I don't read too much about it. But one of the points I made in 2008 was talking about the hypocrisy of both these political parties talking about what we need to do. Hybrid cars are around 15 to 20% more expensive than their petrol counterparts. I'd drive a hybrid if it was cheaper. Shouldn't the government be trying to help us all get into hybrids? Of course, hybrids are sort of a bit passe now. Now getting us into EVs, and it's only taken them 15 fucking years to follow my advice. I didn't even show you that. Sorry, I was reading it off that. That's the blog that I found. Yeah,
yeah. So it's good for the people, absolutely, like this man today, Rush. He bought his EV because of the incentives last year. So that's fantastic.
Right.
So it's good that it's the thing. It's a multi-pronged approach. We just need everything. And I feel like the public transport, like, oh my God, can we just get a train to the airport? All this sort of stuff. It's just would be such, that's tangible shit that I would use 100%.
Yeah. But I get it now that you've got a whole bunch of stuff to put in your car. But just talking about the public transport, it's not public transport necessarily, but for some reason, when you go down a YouTube algorithm and then you have all of them jumping up into your feed. I clicked on one the other day, which was a guy who got a train from Chicago to Los Angeles. And I went, fuck, that looks like fun. And I just thought from there, I went, I wonder what New York to Los Angeles would be. And it's comfortable. There's cabins and you see a whole lot of they stop every couple of hours. And the other thing is if there was decent trains, say Auckland to Wellington, say, I don't know, maybe Nelson or maybe Picton to Invercargill, then like if they were like, I'm not saying we'd be quite bullet train like Japan, but somewhere between what there is now and bullet train, then maybe there'd be more of something for people to use to get between places who either didn't want to fly and didn't want to drive. It could be an option. That could be another thing that money could get put into.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I feel like it would be more popular with tourists.
Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like the 8 hour. Like I fly to Wellington when I don't have to take a set. And also I'm going to be in Wellington for a month. So then I take my car because sort of thing. But when, I usually fly 2 places, but I love the trains. Like that's what I do in the UK. Though having said that, I started hiring cars in the UK because it was so cheap. It's just so cheap. So I am part of the problem. But you could get off the plane in Heathrow and get into a car and drive out 45 minutes later. Like it was astonishingly quick. And I had a car for 2 weeks and it was like £200, and it's about $1 million New Zealand a day here. So, but then also often when I arrive in London, I've got 2 big bags and stuff. And so the train is a pain in the ass. So yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Now it does feel a bit weird because if you're with us now, we normally do this during the day, but we've decided that we're going to do this Big Hairy News in the evenings this week. 10 p.m. every night we'll be on. I'm Pat, as you can see over there, and over there that's Penny. Do you want to do an ET? We can touch fingers.
Am I doing it? I'm doing it the wrong way. That's what it is, right?
Look at the size of your fucking hands. Oh my God. And so tomorrow night, Terada is going to be with us, and then Chewy Bennett, and then Jeremy Elwood, and probably some others. Got some academics and some guests coming up through the week as well. And also, of course, it's a bit confusing because it's 10 p.m. at night. So everyone's confused who's involved with it, including the dog. She's like, what's going on? Why am I down here now? It's like, we're not normally down here now. We're normally up in our own bed. You right? You're okay. You're all right, mate. You stay there. Good girl.
Right.
Good girl. So everyone's a little bit confused about what's going on right now, but no, it's good. It's a bit of fun.
Yeah, and actually, I'm often going to bed now because I used to be a night owl, and then I got a boyfriend, now a husband, who has a day job, and so I wake up most. I know, totally. I wake up at like 5:45, 6 o'clock every day.
Before we get off the EVs and stuff, Emperor is just flexing, waiting for my new Tesla Model 3. Probably won't get delivered this year with Shanghai still in lockdown. I looked at the Model 3s, not that I can afford a Model 3, and I've decided because I'm 6'4" and have a rooted back, like arthritic back, I'm going to have to stay with probably something a bit bigger, so it's a bit higher in the seat. And that unfortunately then adds another premium on for the price of them. So I'm doubly screwed.
I don't remember you being 6'4". You're 6'4".
191 centimeters, technically between 6'3" and 6'4", but I call myself 6'4" because when you're wearing shoes, you just add another little bit on your. I don't
remember you being that tall. That's hilarious. Like I've only seen you in the flesh like twice in God knows how long, but yeah. That's why people are surprised when they learn I'm not a real ginger. So
Be
Yeah.
still, my freaking heart. Right, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Prime Minister and COVID. It's a conversation that I actually thought that Tova O'Brien made some interesting commentary and thoughts on this, and it's not really necessarily around the Prime Minister per se, but it's around the Prime Minister keeping herself in a position where maybe she should have moved out because I'll just play it. I'll just play it because the PM's talking about herself being just an average everyday Kiwi. And the point that Tova's making is, I don't think you're an average everyday Kiwi, and you getting COVID is a bit more serious than perhaps, a school child getting COVID. So we'll have a bit of a listen to what she's got to say. There's a couple of times we'll stop on the way through. And remember, if you want a Sam Sadia it, just shout out and we can stop it to comment on it. And we'll go from there. So here's Tova on the Prime Minister not being just a quote-unquote normal Kiwi.
Jacinda Ardern has made much of the fact that she's just a normal Kiwi going through what many other normal Kiwis have gone through with COVID. The thing is, the Prime Minister, no matter who it is, isn't just a normal Kiwi, and the impact the virus is having on her and her ability to do her job has far-reaching consequences. It also shows up some of the lunacy around some of our existing COVID rules. First up, she didn't use the critical worker exemption when her fiancé Clark Gayford got COVID. The exemption means if she tested negative, she could have left Premier House, gone to work, stayed somewhere else, hopefully preventing the Prime Minister from contracting the virus. The rules should also allow for her to have taken her daughter with her, who at that stage was also testing negative for the virus. The Prime Minister this week misses the emissions reduction plan today, her nuclear-free moment, and the budget on Thursday in the midst of a cost of living crisis. Secondly,
so there's the first one. Now, I mean, I find this one a bit sticky for me because I don't know if I want to leave my partner who had COVID, full stop. Especially, and then there's my child and my partner. And the other thing I guess we don't know, we do know that she didn't test positive because she announced when she did test positive. But I also can see the flip side to that, which is, one of the, if not the most important jobs in the country, and a person who is responsible for a lot of direction from the government. Now, there is something that's coming up, and it hasn't happened yet, but where Tova talks about her own 7-day isolation rules. We don't have a president. It's not the same. So government can continue on without a prime minister there. When the prime minister's overseas, the deputy prime minister steps in. So I can kind of see both sides of it, but I do think it's an interesting point to go, should that job kind of leap over all your other family responsibilities, personal responsibilities, whilst you're prime minister? Is that what you sign up for?
She says she's not a normal New Zealander, and I agree with that, but the absolute howls of derision that would have squealed from everywhere if she had done something like that, I would have been fine with it, absolutely. But then I think that too is just, can you imagine like the person that you love in the world who's suffering and you're like, see ya? You know what I mean? Like that, it's really, yes, and she is the prime minister, but there are other people that can do the jobs. Like I found that at the end of that article when she's like, she's stuffed it up for her government. It's like, our governments are not just one people. This is the problem. Yeah. We
don't have a president.
Grant Robertson is really good whenever I have seen him in front of a microphone. I saw Megan Woods on television this morning doing a perfectly good job. Yes, they don't necessarily have the same spark or what have you, but she's a bit sick and she's with her family. So anyway, I just think the absolute shit show that would have rained down on her from the other commentariats would have just been epic as well.
And Carl agrees with you. It's all optics. It's not about it's about not giving the opposition any further ammunition for bad faith attacks. Yep. So let's listen to point number 2 from Tova.
Her own 7-day isolation rules dictate that she must stay home until Saturday morning, despite already having isolated for a week as a household contact. That's 14 days. 14 days. That the Prime Minister has been taken out of action. In the United States, the Centre for Disease Control, whose research we rely on, only expects 5 days isolation. And
but pedantic that. So if she was isolated for 10 days, that'd be okay, but 14's too much. 14's too much. But pedantic, if you ask me.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
Finally, pre-departure testing. This could be a real balls up for Ardern. On Saturday morning, she's due to fly out to the United States for only her second trip overseas in 2 years. And it's a hyper big deal trip spanning over a week. Ardern's office is yet to confirm whether she's managed to lock in that coveted meeting with the US president in the Oval Office.
So the rest of it goes on about basically she'll miss some meetings overseas now and again. if she could have avoided it, fair point. But if you get the virus, you get the virus.
Yeah, and she's like, the way she's like, and if she'll deal with that snub from the Oval Office, it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's New Zealand. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't get to meet the Oval Office every time you go to it, it's not a snub. The fact that she's been invited to give the Harvard address would be really shit if she misses out on that opportunity. But you know, shit happens, and that's the thing. We're all fucking facing stuff that we've had to miss or because of isolation. I'm turned into a hermit, so I can hopefully still do my shows, etc. I mean, this is just what happens. So I don't know. I agree. I think it's about optics, and hopefully she can go. It'll be interesting to see about the pre-departure situation. Like, she may well not test negative if she's only had it for a week. You know what I mean? Like with the PCR testing, and she can't go in without one. So unless they waive some things, who knows?
I just think as well. And look, I'm not being naive saying this, but we didn't vote for Jacinda. I know that she's the front, and I know some people vote as goes to leader. But, you know, if we elect a party who has a leader and they're the prime minister, and the day after they resign, the next person steps up, we don't have another election. She's not a president.
Yeah.
So the country runs without the prime minister.
Yeah, and this is what I hate about the way politics is, that it's all about the person as opposed to the policies. Often the people don't even think about the policies. They're just like, do I want to beer with this person? And then they'll vote for them. And I hate that. I always have. So, yeah, it's like she is not everything. She has surrounded herself with some other capable people. So this is when you pass it over to them.
I can't actually remember what this part of the conversation was about, but I know it starts at 2 minutes and 42. So this is the end of the conversation. Let's just keep going and see what it's got to say.
Coming symptomatic. Her 10-day trip would be down the gurgler. Some of that planning would have been done a year in advance. She's supposed to be delivering the highly esteemed Harvard commencement address. She's also trying to lure Silicon Valley to New Zealand and promote trade to the tech industry there. These trips are priceless for brand New Zealand. No one is blaming the Prime Minister for getting COVID, obviously.
Well, this whole piece is basically going, you should have left.
Exactly.
Nobody's blaming. Well,
and as I say, I wish her well, but I'm not convinced that she took the right approach here. Being just like the rest of us has a nice kind of team of 5 million vibe to it. But unfortunately, the job means she is not just you or me. She runs the country. She makes the rules, some of which are obsolete. And unfortunately for her, have cost her and the country greatly. I'd like to preface this by saying that
I accidentally started it again, and I wasn't going to play this, but seeing I've started it, it's ironic after you've heard all that, as this is how the interview will start, or the opinion piece was started.
I'd like to preface this by saying that I wish the Prime Minister and her family a swift recovery from COVID and hope their symptoms are mild and short-lived.
Anyway, someone else has said in the chat here that she took maternity leave and that was more than a couple of weeks. Good point. So in other words, the country didn't fall over.
100%. It was 6 weeks, which was phenomenal in itself. But yeah, and she said she makes the rules. No, she doesn't. Tova's talking like she's the bloody queen. So there's a few more people involved.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure the Prime Minister's tuned in at home recovering. Get well, Your Majesty. Is that right? Your Majesty, is that the correct title?
Yeah.
Get well.
Your sparkle dustness. Yes, I'm sure she's totally good. Yeah.
Very quickly, more chats are coming in. This is about the EV thing as well, to jump backwards and forwards a bit. Simple Reality says, I'm waiting for the Chinese EV brands at the New Zealand market. PYD and Xpeng will really shake up the New Zealand car market. Yeah, I mean, depending on, I guess, the quality. I've seen a few of the Chinese EVs online, and far cheaper than I guess mostly American or European versions of it as well.
Yeah, it's the same with e-bikes. The European e-bikes are a lot more expensive than some of the things. I think we get ones that are assembled in New Zealand that parts come from China,
right.
But the ones you get like Shimano and stuff like that, and then bikes from Europe, and then they're assembled. And because my husband now works at 99 Bikes, and he much prefers those ones.
Right. What's 99 Bikes? Plug 'em. What is it?
99 Bikes is it's Australia and New Zealand. It's a big sort of bike chain. This is his pivot job away from working in the engineering construction industry to working at a bike shop. So he works in Glen Innes, and he gets commission. So go to see Matthew in Glen Innes, 99 Bikes, please.
I love Glen Innes. I went to school at Sacred Heart College, so Glen Innes was our local hood, just up the road on Carmody Road.
Yeah.
I boarded there as well. So most Thursdays and Friday afternoons, you'd go down to GI to play Spaceys and get takeaways. That's what we used to do.
So you were just behind all of the big gaggle of artist acting crew that went to
Yeah.
Sacred Heart.
Yeah, like all the Finns and the Dobbins and all those guys were just a bit before us. And then there was a raft of All Blacks. At one stage, there was a big thing that it was Craig Innes and Sean Fitzpatrick and Kieran Crowley. So I guess a school of like 500 people. There was one period where there was 3. So yes, but I was behind all of those people. It wasn't. I was, but one of my claims to fame is I coached Tua Fraser in his rugby team. So there's something.
Right. Who went on to such a massive rugby career.
I know. So I was going to say, do they sell? Because what I want to get is an e-bike with those big fatty fat tires. Are those big cruisers, or are they more like road bikes and that kind of stuff?
I think they have mountain bike, e-bikes. They have cruisers. They have lady ones. They have different types of ones. But they have those. Those really cool. Like mine. I got mine. Mine's because I always care about money slightly more than looks. Even though I don't know, so mine's not quite as cool. But you get those really low riding and turquoise. I want a turquoise one. I don't have one. I've got a black one. Mine was only $2,500, which is actually really cheap for an e-bike because they're expensive. So
cool, man.
Yeah. But that was a while ago.
Let's have a look at our next story. As I said, there was a fair few conversations today going around the sort of climate change model. I'll let you pick, Penny. Should we go to the Buller flooding story first? Or should we go to the Kerry Woodham can't read story first? Which would you like to go first? Now, I know that you're not going to participate in my pettiness here, but which would you like to go? They're the same story. It's just like one after the other. Which way would you like to do it?
Right. Let's go to you've teased Kerry now, so people will be like, ooh, wait, what did she do? She got ejected from Dancing with the Stars and then got a bit sad. Is that?
I have no idea about that. Is that what happened? Was she? I knew she was in it, but did she get booted out?
Last week. I don't know who's got booted out this week. Oh my gosh. You
God.
And I'll look it up.
All right. We're gonna talk about climate change first, the actually important side of things. This is a conversation we've already referenced it sort of tonight a little bit, which is the idea of all this new research coming out saying New Zealand is sinking at the same time as water levels are rising. So for us, they're talking about 10 to 15 years for that increase in water levels to cause significant issues. Now, one of the things I was talking to a mate the other day about this, and I live kind of 40 meters above sea level and I'm sort of inland a little bit, but the other thing it impacts is the water table. So the water table that's underneath the land, when the sea level rises, can impact that as well. So even for those of us who are, at sea level but not by the sea, this kind of stuff can still be impacting to us. So it's good to sort of know and understand that. So the government and councils are exploring options to move parts of Westport away from flood-prone areas. The need to protect the property in these flood-prone areas is what we're going to hear from first of all, and this is the first part of the story.
Jammed into the piers of the Buller River Bridge, tree trunks are a reminder that this is what happens when the Buller floods.
A lot of water.
One of just 2 bridges in and out of the town.
When they close, where does that leave Westport?
So Westport's an island in that situation, yeah.
Cutting off thousands of residents who live in flood-prone areas. Now work is underway to identify land to move parts of Westport.
It is a potential situation that Westport may find themselves in.
We need to be starting having some good conversations around things like ability to move to higher ground.
Documents reveal local council has long-term plans to relocate housing to higher ground, either for new housing and or managed retreat. And government officials are exploring options to speed up subdivision for housing in areas less prone to natural hazards, including the availability of publicly owned land.
There you go. There's the first part of the story. Penny, do you want to jump in first on that?
Yeah, we were talking to the mayor of the district today on the panel, Radio New Zealand, and he said, because I was reading that Nanaima Hoosha had said, can you lay out a case that it's pressing and urgent that you need us to help you with it? And so that's what they're currently doing. And they've got a deadline like in July. So it's not very far away at all. So they're trying to get some information together because traditionally it would fall back on the ratepayers to try and pay for this sort of stuff. But obviously it's such a large scale thing so there we go. So they're, and then maybe they'll be working together in some sort of framework that'll be like Christchurch was, when things are red stickered and stuff like that in Christchurch. And and acquisitions of land and things. So it's kind of like a watch this space situation right now while they try to figure that out. Because
Next part of this video actually talks exactly about the urgency thing. The Nai Mahuta is saying, but what I need evidence as to why this is urgent. Let's just listen to another 20 seconds because that's what we've got queued up.
Well, it doesn't get more urgent than 2 floods in a year.
Not just any floods, but 2 1-in-100-year events washing people out of their homes twice in just 7 months. The minister still wants to see proof and won't guarantee any Crown funding.
But I'm not in a position to give a pre-commitment before I know exactly what those costs look like.
Which is fair. You know, she doesn't know what the story is right now, but yeah, she's saying why. Because that's the other thing. I can't remember the name of the location, but there's a town in Northland that gets flooded out all the time and stuff as well. Why a special central government money. I've said this before on the show. I'm not sure to you or not, Penny, but I have a friend who maybe 15, 18 years ago lived by the Avondale Racecourse, and they were on the 100-year flood plan, and Auckland City Council bought the house off them. So it's not a unique situation, but in that instance, there would have been no central government money. So I guess that's the difference with this. Any council could do this anytime they wanted, but if they're going to seek money from central government, why does this group get prioritized over this group, or however that works?
Yeah. And the way that they put that in the story, it's like some sort of evasive thing, but it's like, no, she's doing the due diligence that is required, and then we'll make the decision. And also, it's like apparently stormwater is in a appalling situation in Buller, and they don't have the funds to fix it. So if only there was some sort of centralized control of the water in the country, wouldn't that be a really good idea instead of taking away from? It's like, wait a minute, some people, I think 3 Waters is a fucking great idea. Let's just get on with it as far as I'm concerned, because this is a perfect example.
I have to be honest, I don't know too much about 3 Waters. I've done a little bit of research, and I've asked the Dunedin Mayor, Aaron Hawkins, to come on a few times and explain to us about it from inside local government. But yeah, just really briefly on that, my understanding is the 3 Waters are obviously drinking water, sewerage, and grey water, and it's just central government taking responsibility for it in 1 or 2 big sort of the equivalent of the DHBs, rather than having every individual council having to do it. Is that pretty much the nutshell?
Yep. Rather than it being a postcode lottery, whether you get, giardia from your water pipes or have to have a boil water notice for months or etc. Like I understand that councils have put a lot of money in investment and then they make money out of it by charging it back. But the fact remains, it's fucked up all over the country. Or like Wellington is a shit show. Christchurch, look what's happening with this bloody sewer. Like these poor bastards with this stink that's constantly happening. And the government, and so I don't know if that would be part of it. Those big sewage tanks. But I'm like, what is this nonsense that these people have had to endure this for 8 months with absolutely no communication from the sounds of it until now? So it's not like the councils are covering themselves in glory. They're covering themselves in shit a lot of the time. So I have no understanding of why that it's seen as a taking away from democracy. And the people that are funding those ads on the television is the taxpayers union, and they can fuck off, So it's like, I don't trust anything that they're advertising for on the television.
I think for me, always the devil is in the detail, but I look at things like, I'm sorry that I often go to an American example, but that's where a lot of my head is often when it comes to politics and stuff. And the beautiful thing that happened when the pandemic hit, and because they weren't centralized to buy their protection gear, their PPP, you had like California betting against Texas, and Texas offering more money than Florida, and Florida offering more money than Massachusetts, because they're all having to compete with each other. And what they did was drove the price up. Whereas if central government had that, they could have gone to the suppliers and go, we've got $5 billion. We expect $7 billion worth of product, and then they could divvy it up. So I can completely see how that works. I guess the flip side to that is, not that I'm a proponent of the flip side, but just to think about it, is the bigger the organization, I guess the easier it is for things to slip through the gaps as well. So, I don't know. I guess is government responsible for roads? It is, isn't it? I mean, overall.
Yeah, I always get a bit like when it's like Waka Kotahi, the council. Yeah, I think the government is.
That seems to work.
The people that might fall through the cracks, funnily enough, will be those smaller places that don't actually have the resources. You know what I mean? And it's like I've said this before about the Coromandel. Like the Coromandel gets completely overloaded at holiday times, but then the people that are overloading it aren't paying the rates, to actually help pay for that. Yeah, they might be paying it through Airbnb fees and stuff like that, but the absolute disproportionate amount of strain that gets put on it by people that are not ratepayers.
Yeah.
Same with the with the bloody, oh Christ, God, is this menopause? I don't know.
Yes.
The lifeguards, they're suddenly under heaps of strain, the lifeguards, and they don't get any extra funding from Aucklanders, which they should. So anyway.
Yeah. That's a really interesting perspective for any kind of holiday destination, even ones that are seen as being more wealthy, like the Queenstowns of the world and that. But I mean, tourists don't pay the rates. I guess you could argue that they do pay the rates, as you say. You said Airbnb, but more like the hotels. But in general, it's the local owners and investors who pay for the roads and pay for the infrastructure. So yeah, interesting. Interesting. Should we just check in on the dog? Make sure she's still here. Oh, yeah, she's still there. She's going for it. She's having a good sleep. Okay. That's like my little, in the radio, you have sweepers between two songs. We can use the dog as the sweeper to be between two stories.
I can do it. I could do it. Sing a sting for you if you like. Big hairy news.
Nice. Anyway. Backing on the back of the story, I want to talk about a commentary that was made on Kerry Woodham's show this morning. Before we actually get too much into I won't give it too much of a preamble. I want to talk about what she said, but first we'll play what she said. She was talking, and I think it was this morning, I saw it today anyway, about what the government is doing on climate change. She was talking about how they're focusing on climate change, and she was questioning whether it was the right time to do that. So here's Kerry Woodham off News Talk ZB.
When households are struggling to put food on the table and petrol in the car, is climate change the most important and meaningful area for the government to focus on, to yank society into a completely different direction?
For fuck's sake.
I know climate change is important, but only because I've been told so time and time and time again.
What?
And because businesses and agencies and governments.
I wonder if she knows if smoking causes cancer only because she's been told time and time again. I wonder if she's done her own research and paid for her own samples but it's a good way to minimize an argument. Like someone's told me so many times, it doesn't mean much. Keep going, listen.
And councils are making big decisions around climate change that impact on me. Insurance premiums cost more, food costs more, fuel costs more, all because we are told we have to mitigate against our carbon emissions.
So the beautiful thing that she just did is we are told. Money's going up and we're told it's for this. She's not, because the truth is it's going up because of this, not because we're told about this. It's because of this. And there's a massive difference. One gives you the ability to question things like the science and the other one doesn't. So we're having to do this because they say we have to, or we have to do this because if we don't, we're fucked. It's a really dismissive way. We've got more. We're going to keep going.
And when I was trying to read the Herald piece to understand what the government cutting emissions would mean to you and to me.
Hard.
There were so many numbers and letters, it was almost incomprehensible.
Numbers and letters.
As an example, this is one paragraph. While the allowance lifts slightly over the second period to 305 MTCO2e between 2026 and 2030, it's still calculated to be about 20% less than what the country pumped into the atmosphere in the 5 years to 2021. The third 240 MTCO2 budget for 2031 to 2035 represents a 35% cut. How does that make any sense to anybody? I'm trying to understand it. I want to understand it. And it makes no sense to me at all.
Because, maths is hard. I'm just thinking, there was that Barbie in the 1950s, and you'd pull the string on the back and it would go, maths is hard. So I've got more to say on this, Penny. If you want to jump in first, you're more than welcome, but I want to take us somewhere with it.
It's just astonishing to me too, just around that, we're going to be spending money on this. It's like, how much does it cost to relocate an entire town, right? Sports relocation cost is a direct climate change situation. So it's the prevention is often better than the cure. Are we going to move the entire country inland a few kilometers? That's going to cost $1 or $2 that might yank her in a direction that she isn't looking at her St. Mary's Bay view that she likes or what have you. I don't know. I just find that pretty short-sighted, desperately short-sighted.
I also wonder, she is in Leighton Smith's old time slot. I wonder if a part of the conversation is maybe just, giving something back to his old listener that maybe he wanted to. But here's the thing, So here's the article she was talking about.
Yeah.
And here's the paragraph she was talking about. While the allowance lists slightly over the second period, yada, 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 yada. And she literally said too many numbers, too many letters. But
She
the
did.
the two lines before it, which he didn't read, says this: over the first period out to 2025, the government wants to keep emissions to around 290 megatons of CO2e. Now, you see that little thing there that she was questioning?
Yeah.
In the line before it explains what it is. 290 megatons of CO2e, which is referred to as MtCO2e. So it explains what it is. MT is megatons, C megatons, CO2e. It's obviously carbon dioxide. Now, I thought E was probably emissions, but I be honest, I didn't know. Do you know what I did? I Googled it. And the first result, carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2e, the number of metric tons of CO2 emissions with the same global warming potential as one. So it didn't take very long to figure out, A, what MtCO2 stood for, because it said it in the line before, and what the E actually was as well. So now, if Kerry's watching, maybe we could just reread it for her and take out the big hard letters and numbers and put in the words for her. While the allowance lifts slightly over the second period, okay, the allowance of carbon dioxide lifts slightly, that's 305 megatons of carbon emissions. See there, it's got there. Between 2026 and 2030, it's still calculated to be about 20% less than what the country pumped into the atmosphere in the 5 years to 2021. I mean, even if you didn't quite get to grips with all these hard letters and numbers, it says pretty clearly that the emissions we're talking about is 20% less than the previous area to 2021. I kind of wanted to play it because I don't know whether she is really that stupid or she's playing a game for her audience. And if she is, it becomes completely inauthentic. And if it's inauthentic, it's the worst kind of broadcasting, in my opinion. Now, okay, it was a bit harsh. Is she really that stupid? I guess I don't want to be too harsh. I'll say if she really doesn't get it, when actually the answers are in front of her and one Google search away, and then you'd understand it 100%.
Well, I think it's a whole different thing. Whereas what I've taken from what she said before is that she just doesn't care enough to try because she doesn't think it applies to her. Because it's a bit hard to understand if you haven't really got, I mean, like, it can be, sometimes I look at things like that and blur a bit because I just trust the science though. That's the thing. I'm like, this is bad. You people are doing the things that we need to do to make it better. And I will trust the scientists to know the minutiae rather than me just deciding because I find it boring and tedious that it's not true, which to me, I don't think it's a completely stupid thing from that. I just think it's like, I just can't be fucked. So I don't care anymore. That's what I took from her tone.
Yeah. Anyway, too many numbers, too many letters.
Yeah. Wow.
Not entirely sure what to do about that. Speaking of climate change and flooding, Grant says continued flooding events indicate that some mitigation projects to carry away excess rainfall ought to be in planning. Yeah, completely. Well, I was talking about this with one of my kids the other day when we were driving up a hill here in Dunedin, and we were talking about this, and I was like, just remember, because she was asking about the water pipes, the taking the rainwater away, whatever that's called, under the ground. And I was like, you remember when those pipes were built 120 years ago under the ground? There was about, I don't know, 50% of the houses that were here. So now that there's double the number of houses, if not more, that's a lot more runoff into the ground. So the pipes aren't able to handle it. And so kind of what Grant is saying, I guess, there's the carry away excess rainfall is another way to do it. Where I live in Northeast Valley in Dunedin, there's a main road. And when the rain hits well enough, there's a creek on one side of the road. It gets very high and we get little fountains shooting up out of the manhole covers. And it's not uncommon. And so when I talk about water level rising and that sort of thing, even if you're not by the water's edge, like I could imagine in 20 years from now, there having to be something significant done in the valley, because if you don't, that might be a more common occurrence, making the road dangerous, if not impossible to drive on. So it's not just about those who are living by the beaches. It's about the level of water and water table as well.
And I'm West Auckland and I'm in sort of Te South. Like the mangroves are not that far away. So I don't know how much it would have to rise to get to us. We're quite we're not that far away. I'm probably only a K away from the water. So who knows what would happen, you know? But I was when we were buying a house, I was assiduously looking at floodplains and stuff on LIM reports and things to be like, get the fuck away from those, definitely, and channels and stuff. So we've done well here. And we're on a bit of a lean, bit of an angle, so the water runs away, which is what I wanted.
Yeah, no, when moving to Dunedin nearly a decade ago, there was quite quickly there was talk about an area of Dunedin South, it's called South Dunedin, and there was some pretty bad floods there. And we'd bought up in the hills, up in an area called Wakari, and decided there and then would never be buying down in the south area, down on the flat or near the water in Dunedin, because it was already showing signs.
Yeah.
I'm in a big house with lots of kids and room and space. But when I move from this time, when I finally get rid of those children, I'll be moving to a much smaller place, and it'll be in the hills. It'll be in the hills. You know, I'm not going to be down on the flat anymore. And part of the reason is literally for the conversation around, you know, water tables rising, sea levels rising. And even though they're talking about a meter, you don't have to be 200 meters up to avoid a meter, but why not? If you can, why not?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's why I chose this one.
Carl says that Kerry Woodham is doing her very best impression of Jimmy Dore. You know who Jimmy Dore is, Penny?
No.
Jimmy Dore is a commentator, a YouTube commentator who used to work with left-wing, I guess they call them progressive hosts in America called the Young Turks. And he left the Young Turks and went and started his own thing called Jimmy Dore, and sort of was doing his own thing. Was a little bit more militant than they were, a little bit more sort of independent, not quite so corporate. And in the last kind of 12 to 18 months has become very, very questioning of anything to do with COVID, and sort of I'm not saying he does this, but he kind of gets accused of doing that right-wing grift thing about sharing information. Now he may believe it, and I'm not saying that is what he does, but that's what he's getting accused of quite a bit. So that when Carl says Kerry's doing a Jimmy, that's what he's meaning.
She did have some questionable COVID takes as well, which made me sort of we're not on the same page, her and I. We're not on the same page, and that's fine.
Yeah. All right. I want to have this one last story. I think in particular that this is something that has, I guess, got your interest up, Penny. Sex harassment. I think it's interesting to talk about that term as well. Sex harassment. Calling a man bald is a form of sex harassment. UK Employment Tribunal rules. A British Employment Tribunal has ruled that calling a man bald can be considered sex harassment, according to reports. Sex-based or sex harassment is not to be confused with sexual harassment, which is defined as unwanted physical advances or conduct of a sexual nature. Sex harassment also involves unwanted conduct, but typically constitute offensive behavior which is targeted at an individual's sex or gender. For example, an employee frequently telling derogatory or demeaning jokes about women could constitute sex harassment if a particular individual deems this behavior unwelcome and offensive. The ruling came after a man complained about being called a bald cunt at his former workplace.
I just think this story is ridiculous. I mean, if I was to say, look, it's that bald guy. If you were like, there's my husband, he's that bald guy over there. You know, how is that offensive? If I'm like, I hate you, you're a bald cunt, clearly that's a very different intention. So I find this whole thing just very strange.
It is fascinating. I'm intrigued at the idea about sex harassment, though. Like if you call, like if let's say you were someone like, I don't know, Jada Pinkett Smith, and you called her bald, would that still be sex harassment? Is it particularly sex harassment because it's a male and male pattern baldness is a thing? What if you were calling a woman a bald person?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. I just find it utterly bizarre. I just think this person is obviously very insecure about being bald, but also being called a cunt by their boss. I mean, like, this guy is not a top drawer of a boss if he's calling somebody that. I find it all very strange.
Because if he's Australian, he could have been used it in a form that was endearing. You know, like Australians use that word in an endearing way.
Top cunt. But that's top cunt, not bald cunt. You know, like that. It's a very different situation. I don't know. Like, yeah, I had never heard sex harassment before. It makes perfect sense. It's like saying girls are dumb as opposed to, hey, dumb girl, will you fuck me? There's the distinction right there. I'm here for other definitions to be provided with filthy language. But yeah, I just thought this was all very strange. And it's not about being bald. It's just about the derogatory tone. It's all about intention, as per usual. It's all about intention.
Yeah, I just think this is an example of where we're at in society at the moment, with people getting offended by all sorts of things. And some of them, I wonder how old the person is. I mean, I'm not trying to throw a whole generation under a bus, but I wonder if the bald cunt is a millennial or a Gen Z, because they do seem to be a slightly more offended than most people a tad older than them.
It just seems like such a weird thing to singular. He said, I wasn't so worried about being called a cunt, but it was being called bald. I'm like, what? Like, to me, any boss that calls you that is a terrible person that needs to be called out. Absolutely. You cannot use language like that in a workplace. But then to go, oh, it hurt my feelings because I have no hair. It's like, yeah, and I get it. Being bald is like, I've talked about this with my husband. Like, I just can't imagine your hair just marching backwards from your forehead and then going away. Like, it would be very traumatic. I get that, but it is also a descriptor. And again, it all depends. As I say, if you just go, oh, he's that one over there, or if, oh, you're a total baldy or something, then that's a bit mean as well. So it's just about having respect. Having respect.
The idea about a descriptor, though, there are many descriptors which are people now finding very offensive. Like, and I thought of one straight away as you said that. I don't know if it's still in the common parlance as being offensive, but calling a female bossy. What if she is actually bossy? Like,
she's not. So she's assertive. She's assertive.
But bossy is not a derogatory term. It can be. I mean, if you use it in a derogatory term, it can be if she's not. But a guy can be bossy as well. And a girl can be bossy. So there are already, what I'm saying, without a debate on the word bossy, is there are already lots of descriptors that many people deem as offensive. Is bald allowed to be in there or not?
You can't just pluck an example out of the air and then not expect me to come back at you about it.
No, you can go for it. You can go for it. That wasn't important. Go.
But it's bossy, strident, stroppy, shrill. Words that are much more commonly associated with a woman. It's the same with slut, margarine legs, tart, all these words that are much more...
Did you say margarine legs? What the fuck is that?
Easy to spread, like they don't say that about dudes, etc. And it's the same thing. I mean, that's why Tina Fey called her autobiography Bossy Pants, because it's about the fact that if a woman is aggressive or assertive, particularly, or has a strong sense of of management, then they can be called bossy, whereas often that's not the case with men. Anyway, but yes, you can get bossy men as well, absolutely. Yeah. But it's about.
I'm not actually disagreeing with you that word gets used as a negative towards women when it's inappropriate. But all I'm saying is that, I mean, the word fat is a descriptor. People can be fat, and people also can get offended by calling fat if they are fat. So there are words. All I'm saying is there are words, even if they are fat, and you call them fat, it can offend people. Whereas it's just a descriptor. But you can also call them a fat fucker and use it in a more aggressive way. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just fascinating that the focus is on the word bald rather than that's what's fascinating about.
Yeah, and it is true, and it's like, because for me, I find fat more like, if you say, oh, the fat one, that it just is offensive if you were to say that in a workplace and stuff as well. And I don't know, it feels like there's a lot of internalized hatred about the baldness to me. That's what's coming out here. So, it's
why would that be offensive? If there was a group of people and you were trying to describe them all, the tall one, that wouldn't be offensive. The shorter one, the Māori one, and the fat one. Why is the fat one offensive? If they're
just
fat?
Because of the connotations that come with it.
What
and
connotations?
Also, there's a lot of negative connotations that come with that word around, that somebody's has control over it, whereas they don't necessarily. Not always. Some people do, obviously. I don't know. That's like, good God, we could be there forever around this sort of thing. But yeah, it is a descriptor, but it's just a nasty one.
Well, I just think it comes down to, like, I agree with what you're saying about it depends how you use it. I mean, like what it's like when you're with your friends. Your friends can call you whatever they want and they can get away with it because you love them. The friend can call you, how's it going, you big fat fucker? It's good to see a big hug and that kind of stuff. If a stranger in the street calls it to you.
Sorry, women don't say that to each other. They
I'm not saying
absolutely.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
your friends. I mean, in general, a friend. Guys,
Yeah,
especially, can rib each other and rip each other and that kind of stuff. But if a stranger in the street does it, it's a different connotation because you don't have the relationship. So I think so much of it's about what's behind the meaning.
Yeah, and if your boss says it, it
Yeah,
is just
totally.
yeah, that's
Totally.
not on. Yeah, but I don't find bald. It's weird. It's like it's about, to me. It's, as I say, it's an internalized hatred of what's going on top of his head. Whereas I think bald dudes look great. I've married one, so
Was he bald when you married him?
no, he wasn't. But he should have shaved his hair earlier than he did, just quietly. He's now going to sleep in.
I'll show you the best photo in the world of a transition from a bald man to a not bald man. I did a podcast the other day with a guy off YouTube called Jerry Rig Everything. I'm just trying to look for a photo of him. So that's what he looks like now, right? You got that?
Yeah.
And there's his university photo.
Yeah, he looks hot bald.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah,
I was a bit moist for the whole conversation.
totally. Yeah, he
I
looks
just think
really
that's
hot.
one of the best. That's one of the best before and after photos I've ever seen because it's just so different.
Yeah. And Matt looks quite different, and it's quite interesting too because there's so many connotations around English men and baldness and also he loves Fred Perry shirts, and he actually has he just bought one of those Fred Perry shirts, and then the whole Proud Boys thing happened, and so hated that because he just loves the product. And Fred Perry shirts, they're good shirts, they're really good quality, and Fred Perry didn't ask for them to get wound up with all this bloody racist bullshit. So sometimes Matt can worry about that sort of thing because of what is projected, but he is not that way at all.
Cool. All right. Hey, I think we're done. Thank you for doing these first evening ones with us. It's time for your bedtime. Certainly time for my beauty sleep. For people who are with us now, 10 o'clock every evening all this week, we're going to be doing this. Tomorrow night, we're going to be on with Teradar. The next night, local comedian here in Dunedin, Mike Chewy Bennett. I think the night after that, we've got Jeremy Elwood. Jeremy's going to come on either Thursday or Friday. And we are doing this news conversation every night at 10 p.m. And you're welcome to join. Lots of people have tonight, actually. So thank you for your thoughts and your comments here. And we will continue it tomorrow. But we're done for now. That's us, Big Hairy News. You can see down the bottom the YouTube channel if you want to find us on demand. That's also the place if you're interested in that. If you know who Jerry Rig Everything is, Zach Nelson, that's also the place you can go and see that podcast if you want to check that out as well. But other than that, we will catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Thanks, Penny. Always appreciate you, mate. And thank you for jumping in.
No worries.
And everybody else, we'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Hooroo!